Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. My name's Daniel, Regional Sales Manager here at Martech Marine. We're going to be running through potable water testing with a few different aspects in mind: sustainability, legislation and compliance, and the costs involved. If you do have any questions, you should see a Q&A feature at the top, and we'll get to them at the end. Just put your questions in as you go. We'll be sharing the slides after the presentation as well, so don't feel like you need to make notes or anything. Dave's here to forward on the slides for me. So Dave, can we move on to the next slide, please? There we go. So what we're going to look at, the challenge itself, maintaining safe drinking water at sea, the sustainability issues around that and the costs involved. We'll be looking at our own solution, which is a potable water testing kit for onboard use and how that can enhance the crew's welfare. We'll be going through the contents of the kit and looking at the different extras that we have as add-ons. And then we'll be open up for questions. Next slide, please, Dave. So maintaining safe drinking water at sea has got some unique challenges. Contamination risks on board a vessel are high. Unsafe water can have serious consequences for the crew. And while you're out at sea, obviously, that can be serious issues, meaning you need to divert to port. And there's regulation, compliance, legislation surrounding the subject as well. Next slide, please, Dave. So we'll first look at this extract from MLC 2006, so Maritime Labour Convention. It's talking about improperly managed water and how that's a transmission route for infectious disease. Outbreaks of illness are associated with contaminated bunker water, cross-contamination between the potable and non-potable water, improper loading procedures, poor design and construction of storage tanks, and inadequate disinfection. Now, interestingly, evidence from outbreaks indicates that sewage is one of the cross-contamination with sewage is one of the most common sources of outbreaks of disease. Next slide, please, Dave. So what could make the drinking water unsafe? Chlorine is used as disinfectant in a lot of situations. These have to be at a certain level to be safe for humans. So WHO regulations, World Health Organization, state that less than 5 milligrams per litre should be left as residual chlorine. E. coli and enterococci are bacteria which come from fecal matter. So strong indication there that there would be cross-contamination with the sewage. Overall, bacteria levels have to be kept low. Bacteria, there's all types of bacteria. Some are safe, some are not safe. And legislation states that these need to be kept below 100 CFU per milliliter. So that's 100 colony-forming units. pH levels, so acidity and alkaline, we expect a certain level for our bodies, so that needs to be between 6.5 and 8.5 pH. High levels and low levels can both cause issues. Copper is used in a lot of building materials, so pipe work, and it will corrode over time and can cause health problems. Iron, while not dangerous until high levels itself, can be an indicator that there are other heavy metals present. And Legionella, which can grow in biofilm and often in stagnant water, it can cause respiratory problems and even death. Next slide, please, Dave. So back at MLC 2006. Now this, in my opinion, is the most important slide in the presentation. So this is looking at the legislation behind drinking water. 1 second, there's one in the lobby. I'll just admit them in. So this states that the competent authority, so the ship owner, the HSEs, shall require that frequent and documented inspections be carried out on board ships. And that's in relation to supplies of food, drinking water. Now, if you're relying on 6 monthly lab tests or yearly lab tests, and there was an incident on board, would that be seen to be frequent enough? You need to ask yourself the question, how often is frequent? Next slide, please, Dave. Sustainability is obviously at the forefront of our minds in today's society. Green initiatives, carbon footprint, environmental impact. These are all things that are at the forefront of business. So if we go on to the next slide. If you don't have confidence, or if you can't ascertain that your potable water is safe on board, many companies, many vessels will be relying and buying bottled water, which is a great hazard to the environment. Plastic waste makes up to 80% of all marine pollution. Only 1% of that will float. And 16.5 million tons of plastic are set to enter the ocean this year alone. So again, unless you're confident in your potable water, you may be turning to bottled water. I had a customer speak to me just this week saying that if the crew aren't confident, then they'll go out and buy their own bottled water as well. So it's not just a case of the company deciding to move away from it. It's making sure that the crew are confident with that water on board as well. Next slide, please, Dave. So obviously cost is very important when we're looking at our potable water solutions. Now, there's cost to compliance, sustainability, crew welfare, convenience. Cost isn't just monetary, it's not just financial, but it can be reputational and operational cost as well. Next slide, please, Dave. So there's different ways of managing the potable water on board, whether you pump it on board, whether you've got a water treatment plant, whether you're using bottled water. Different methods have different costs, accuracies, and implications for compliance. So bottled water is the easiest and safest method, but it is costly. It's not cheap to be putting bottled water on board. It's not only financially costly, but it's costly to the environment as well. But you can have confidence in bottled water. Lab testing is another option. Now, lab testing is expensive. I'm sure you're all aware in some parts of the world, this could be over $1,000 per lab test, but it is highly accurate. Sometimes there's wait times. It's not always convenient if you're in port and you've got a quick turnaround. And if we look back at the legislation for MLC, stating that, stating that the frequency of the testing, it's not always possible to do it that frequent. If you're, again, most of my customers would be testing every 6 months, 3 months at most with the lab test. Is that frequent enough? If you're on a long voyage, for instance, are you going to be able to get lab testing done frequently enough? Next option is onboard testing, which in my head would supplement lab-based testing. It's convenient, very cost effective and flexible in terms of how often the testing is done, as well as what parameters are tested. And so compliance is very easy with onboard testing. And if you're not doing any testing at all, you're clearly not compliant and risk detention in port. There's risk to the crew's safety and welfare unless you're using bottled water, and could be costly to the reputation as well should there be an incident on board. Next slide, please, Dave. So our solution is to be testing on board using a potable water testing kit. And that allows you to have confidence in the drinking water, test as often as you like, and remain compliant. Next slide. So the test kit is really easy to use. No training is needed, although we do offer training through an online portal, Martech Academy. It's quick and easy to normally just follow through the manual and log the results as you go. It tests for all the parameters that you need, so chlorine, E. coli, pH levels. Fast and reliable, so most of the tests will give you results within minutes. There are a few tests in there which require incubation, and an incubator is provided with the kit. It's long lasting, so the longest shelf life of some of the reagents is 7 years. Some of the reagents have a shorter shelf life of between 1 year and 18 months, so the bacteria tests, the Enterococci and E. coli. So they will need replenishing more often, but with the longer reagents, you know, there's minimum cost in replacing them over time, and yearly top-ups become very cheap and cost-effective. And you're meeting compliance, so MLC 2006, IMO guidelines, WHO regulations, class, flag state, you'll tick every box. Next slide, please, Dave. It allows you to reduce plastic waste by reducing your reliance on bottled water, and therefore reduce the environmental impact that you're having. It'll allow you to detect any problems early rather than finding out at stage of lab test that there's a problem, and you'll save money on lab tests as well. Now, I said before that it's a really complements lab testing. But a lot of my customers have told me that they will be doing a potable water onboard test before sending off to the lab. If you were to send a lab test off and the results were to fail, then you'd have to make the remedies and then get another lab test done. But with the onboard testing kit, you can check that the results are going to be positive, and that there's no problems. Next slide, please, Dave. And how will testing on board affect your crew? Next slide. So the crew will have confidence in the potable water, and they'll be able to test anytime they want, which will give them peace of mind, reduce stress, which obviously increases their welfare and safety. Early detection of contaminants means they can be acted upon quickly, and that will prevent illness and ensures the well-being of the crew. They'll be happy. It seems like a silly one, but we expect clean drinking water at home. Why should the crew on board our vessels not expect clean drinking water as well? And that's going to boost morale and satisfaction. And it protects your reputation as well. If there was an incident on board, you might have to divert. You know, your relationship with charterers might go down. So it's keeping that reputation of the company strong. Next slide, please, Dave. The costs involved in onboard potable water testing kit are low. If we move on to the next slide, you get more for your money with our DrinkSafe kit than any other test kit on the market. So we provide a lot of tests in the initial kit. And as previously mentioned, some of the shelf lives will be up to 7 years, so they're not going to need topping up every year. The spares and reagents that are needed, so more often, the bacteria plates, they are cost effective. You're only going to have to replace what you need once you've got the kit on board. You don't need to buy a new kit every time. And we are very quick at getting them to the vessel. With every kit in the manual, there's a reorder form. So if the crew actually check every year what's running out, what's running low, what's coming up to the shelf life, it's very easy for them to let the office know what they require and get that out to them. And you're avoiding potential fines and penalties that are associated with non-compliance of drinking water regulations, staying compliant, keeping the crew safe, and saving money in that aspect as well. Next slide, please, Dave. So if we have a look at the contents of the DrinkSafe kit, I've got a few of the components here as well, so we'll run through them. As I mentioned, the longer shelf life tests, we include a lot of them in the original kit. So you've got 500 of different chlorine tests, 500 pH tests, the copper and iron come in 250. And all of them are done using a comparator disc. So you would put a sample, 10 milliliter sample in both of the test tubes. In this one here, you would grind up one of the reagent tablets, and then it's a simple case of just rotating the disc until the color matches between the two. Once you've matched them, at the bottom corner, you'll read the value. So that would be 7.2 pH, for example. For the Enterococci and E. coli tests, we provide sterile containers. These are sealed and come completely sterile. These get filled up with 100 milliliter of a sample, and then the reagent is added for the various tests. Now, these ones need putting in an incubator for 48 hours, and then the results can be checked. We include bacteria plates, which also require incubating. So these are also sealed. You take off the seal, you would drop 1 milliliter of sample onto the plate using a one-time use syringe. It's important to use a one-time use syringe because it needs to be uncontaminated. And again, with the legislation being less than 100 CFU, you basically count the amount of colonies that are on the disc, and that needs to be less than 100. You would come with an incubator, that would be for the E. coli. So the E. coli is a coliform test, and then with the UV light, you are able to detect whether E. coli is present. Again, E. coli, Enterococci, these are strong indicators that there would be contamination with the sewage, which is a very high risk to health. And it comes with a logbook, manual and training DVD as well. We also offer the training through Martech Academy. Next slide, please, Dave. So we've got a couple of add-ons. Our Legionella testing kit is separate from the actual potable water testing kit itself. Now, the reason for that is because class state, flag state legislation varies very much, and in some places very stringent, and some of our customers need a lot of these kits. It's very quick to use, gives you a simple positive or negative within 35 minutes. The test itself is like a COVID test, which you'll all be very used to. Our kit comes with a filtration system, which greatly concentrates the sample, which makes it much more efficient and accurate. And you can also test biofilms with it. So that's sort of the gunk that builds up on the taps, on the showers. And this is a breeding ground for Legionella, so it's important to be testing these as well. On a vessel, there is often a lot of dead legs in the plumbing. So if there is, our recommendation would be if there's, you know, a sort of say a crew quarter which hadn't been used for a while, to be testing in them areas. Always switch up where the testing's being done. Don't test the same places again and again to get a better idea of what's going on throughout. And then we offer a sewage effluent testing kit as well as an add-on, which will guarantee compliance with MARPOL. So that tests for everything that you need to make sure that the sewage effluent is to the right standard to be discharging. As an add-on, it's very cost effective because it shares the same incubator with the DrinkSafe Max kit, which gives you easy compliance for a very little cost. Next slide, please, Dave. So you're probably all aware of the webinar offer that we've got. For anyone who's attended, we do have a discount code available, which will give you 10% discount on any Legionella Max or sewage effluent test kits which have been added on to the purchase of a DrinkSafe Max kit. I'm sure there's information in the email that you've received regarding that, but if you quote the code DrinkSafe Webinar 2024, that's available until the 10th of April. And that's everything. So if we can open up for questions. Did we get any questions, Dave?
We do have 2 questions in the chat. The first one is, does onboard testing replace lab testing?
No, so at least 1 lab test a year needs to be done to get certified results. If we look back at MLC 2006 stating frequent and documented, I strongly believe if there was an incident on board the vessel and the crew got sick, say there was an investigation and it had been 5 months, 4 months since your last lab test, do you think it would be seen that you were doing enough for the crew's safety and welfare? Do you think that would be seen as frequent enough for the crew's safety? So lab testing does need to be done. You can't replace that, but it supplements the lab testing and allows you to test as often as you like. It gives the crew the confidence.
Thanks, Dan. And the second question we have is, how often is frequent as stated in MLC 2006? How often does frequent actually mean?
It's a grey area. It's a very ambiguous word. It's not defined. It's again, I think I've basically just answered that, but some sources will say you need to be testing the potable water every week. I would say more than a month is too much. We provide enough in the kit to be testing some of the parameters daily, so the pH and the chlorine. Other parameters we don't suggest to test as often, so the bacteria, the enterococci. But really, I think it comes down to if there was an investigation, what would be seen to be doing enough. And I think it's a very grey area. But at least once a month for all parameters and probably once a week on other parameters.
Thank you. We do have a question from Captain Emin from Akmar Shipping. He's put the same offer may use for DrinkSafe equipment, same like bacteria plate supply. They already use DrinkSafe kit on the vessel, so I believe he's asking if the discount can be used for other DrinkSafe equipment as well.
So I think your question is about replenishment. So if you're wanting replenishments to use the offer, I don't see that being an issue at all, but I will confirm with that for you and get back to you on that. I don't see it being an issue. I think we'll easily be able to honour that, yeah.
And they are all the questions we have currently.
Okay, we'll give it another minute in case there are any more questions, and then we will sign off. Thank you all for coming. I hope you've learned something. Again, for me, I think the compliance part of this was the most important. I think people overlook the fact that MLC states frequent and documented inspections, and rely on them 6 monthly, 1 yearly lab tests, which in our mind at Martech is not sufficient enough. Yeah. Any more?
We don't have any more in the chat, then. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, if there are any more questions, please do get in touch and we will be happy to answer them for you. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Cheers. Bye-bye.